Hi, my name is Crystal Crane, and for our assignment, Pedagogical Innovations, I chose to research animal-assisted therapy in the classroom. Assisted therapy or canine-assisted therapy helps in enhancing a student's mindfulness. Why is mindfulness important? Well, basically, it backs up everything that we just shared about how emotions are tied into a student's academic performance. Mindfulness, simply put, is learning to attend to your present moment. So really paying attention in the moment, being able to handle distress with intention and non-judgment. This is from an article by Patricia Broderick called Why Teaching Mindfulness Benefits Students. This was a wonderful article. Why is mindfulness important? Well, researchers prove, once again, social and emotional well-being equals positive academic outcomes. We simply cannot just shove academic information into students and expect them to excel if their emotional needs are not being met. Okay, so these things are intertwined. Mindfulness contributes to motivated learning. A kid that is maybe has some mindfulness can help with intrinsic motivation for himself. It also builds something called emotion regulation. What is that? Well, strategies used to moderate affective experiences and to meet demands of different situations or to achieve certain goals. I teach third grade, and oftentimes students we're the first grade in the higher elementary. So they're coming to us from a lower elementary, and we find that expectations in that lower elementary are significantly different than what they're expected to do when they get to us. As a result, kids in the third grade have high levels of stress. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot more tests, there's a lot more pressure on each test. Third grade is a testing grade. And so we're seeing these types of reactions in our students. So animal-assisted therapy, what is it? Animal-assisted therapy is using animals in order to facilitate some sort of therapeutic outcome among a patient or a clientele. There was an article published, an evidence-based review article and discussion pointer in the American Journal of Critical Care that discusses a study that took place in a cardiac unit. Basically, there were 76 patients, and they discovered that those who received animal-assisted therapy with a therapy dog, and this is a direct quote from the article, demonstrated significantly greater decreases in systolic pulmonary artery pressure, pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, epinephrine levels, norepinephrine levels, and state anxiety scores. So basically their blood pressure, how quickly their heart was beating, stress, anxiety. We all know, like, if there's stress and anxiety, our heart pounds a little bit more, we get a little clammy. All of these things were decreased in those patients due to animal-assisted therapy visits while they were in the hospital. The other thing this article goes on to say, which I thought was incredibly important, this is a quote, nurses in our unit could see that once a patient's emotional integrity had plummeted, that patient's physiological deterioration was soon to follow. So this medical experiment, if you will, or study, proved that once a patient's emotional levels dropped, everything else was soon to follow. So I thought how relevant that our students, their emotional level and integrity is that much more important. They don't have the same coping mechanisms that maybe an older cardiac, and I'm assuming obviously, but an older cardiac patient may have. They don't have those abilities, and that's oftentimes why we teachers see students lash out and do these behaviors that are annoying or unfortunate or destructive in our classroom or derailing the whole thing. Well, most of the time, it's because there's some sort of thing that they can't express in any other way. And so having the opportunity for animal-assisted therapy, having that available in the classroom helps derail that. In another article published by St. John Fisher College, the impact of canine-assisted therapy and activities on children in an educational setting. This researcher went on to really explore benefits of having animal-assisted therapy in the classroom, in the educational setting, and there was an incredible amount of research and benefits that were shown to take place. For example, reading programs. We actually have a reading program for our local shelter where kids can read to a shelter dog. And what that has shown, studies have shown that actually improves fluency, vocabulary, and confidence in our children that are reading to this canine. The other thing is academic benefits. Having that, and because we're talking about dogs, having a dog in the classroom helps reduce stress. It increases motivation. They can absolutely be a positive reinforcement in the classroom. It has shown to help students with focus and academic persistence, which is incredible. I know that we live in a generation, in a culture where oftentimes if it's not gotten the first time, these kids see themselves as failures. And one of the things that I'm trying to focus in my own classroom is on growth mindset and not getting stuck in that failure. And the research has shown that having dogs in the classroom can help facilitate that. There are physical benefits. For example, maybe there's a student that doesn't have proficient gross motor skills. While they're throwing a ball for the dog fetches it and brings it back. They're not only releasing that ball, but then they have to grab that ball. And that's hand-eye coordination. Obviously, that's a more extreme case that you may or may not see in an everyday classroom setting, but it's there nonetheless. Another one is emotional. There's emotional benefits. They help address grief, anxiety, and stress. Personally, I'm going to share my personal experience with animal-assisted therapy and when it started. But I have a classroom pet. I have a guinea pig for my classroom pet. And this was because I have seen animal-assisted therapy be fantastic with kids before. Well, right after we got this classroom pet, I had a student whose dad passed away. She came to school the very next day after his passing and was very, very upset, obviously. She came to school, I think, to try and get her mind off it and move forward. Once I found out what was going on, I had her sit by my desk holding the guinea pig, and she sat there for hours just stroking him and was able to calm herself in a way that she hadn't been able to calm herself before. And so she was learning to self-regulate those emotions. She was learning how to handle that anxiety, that grief, and that stress. So that was just one example of seeing that work real time in the classroom. And the other way is socially. Why animal-assisted therapy? I have had a passion for animal-assisted therapy since 2011. I had the opportunity to go and work at a facility called Island Dolphin Care in Key Largo, Florida, where they're doing animal-assisted therapy with dolphins. And what was amazing about this facility, I was there for 2 months, was they have week-long programs, and these are typically kids that are they've got some pretty severe limitations, and they come to the facility, and every single day they have some sort of therapy session. So there's typically an art session where they're working on fine motor skills, gross motor skills. They're working on hand-eye coordination. They're working on all different sorts of skills that you would typically see in an OT, occupational therapy setting. But the other thing that we're seeing with at least the kids that I had worked with was they were disconnected. They weren't emotionally connected to people, to beings, to what they were doing. The second half of their therapy session, they were there about 3 hours, was getting in the water with the dolphins. And what was so amazing, we would see transformations where a child would come in and they would be nonverbal on Monday, and by Friday they were speaking, or walking, or really choose anything, and these animals help to facilitate that. The beautiful thing about animals is they can oftentimes, they are so perceptive that they pick out somebody's need before sometimes that person is even cognizant of it. There are reported stories of dolphins knowing that a woman is pregnant before she even knows, and all the dolphins surrounding her in the water. This happened at our therapy center. And so because these animals are often so much more hypervigilant and aware than we humans allow ourselves to be, we're in the age of distraction, right? Technology, Facebook, Instagram, all these lights and bells and whistles. These animals are helping bring a heightened awareness to these kids, to these people, and creating connections that maybe those kids, they can't create with a therapist. And so that dog or that dolphin or that cat or that horse, I've also worked in equine assisted therapy, they're that one thing that kid feels safe enough, or that teenager or that adult for that matter, feels safe enough to connect with. So many times, I don't know if any of you have pets, so many times you catch yourself talking to your dog, you catch yourself talking to your goldfish, and there's that, it's a safety. There's a safety in it. There's a bond, that unconditional love, that acceptance, and that knowing. And so, in conclusion, I believe that animal-assisted therapy would be an incredible addition to a classroom in terms of pedagogical innovations. I believe that it could help facilitate growth among my students. I believe that it could help definitely bridge the gap between students that are emotionally disconnected or maybe haven't developed those skills. Having an animal can help teach them that. And I believe that it can also be a great source of building community and relationship in the classroom.